You ever make a decision so dumb, so obviously terrible that even while you're doing it, some deep part of your brain is screaming at you to stop? That was me when I took the night shift job at the Skinwalker Motel. The ad didn't say Skinwalker Motel, of course. It just said, hiring, night clerk, quiet motel outside Tuba City, Arizona, $30 per hour, meals included. I was broke, couch surfing, and 2 months behind on everything. The pay sounded unreal, but I needed it. So I emailed the guy. He replied within minutes. Can you start tonight? That should have been the first red flag, but I ignored it. Desperation is a hell of a drug. I took a bus from Flagstaff to a dusty stop in the middle of nowhere. The motel sat alone in the desert, surrounded by sagebrush and silence, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the road. Shingles missing, sign flickering. The air had that dry, electric weight, like something waiting to strike. The sun was already bleeding into the horizon when I got off. The front office door creaked open before I even knocked. A man stood inside. Tall, graybeard, red flannel shirt buttoned up. His eyes looked like they hadn't seen sleep in a decade. You Jake? Yeah. He didn't introduce himself, just handed me a laminated sheet and a metal keychain with the number 0 on it. The key was old and tarnished, like it had been dug up rather than cut. You read those rules, he said. Don't break them, not even a little. I looked down at the sheet. There were 10 rules printed in bold type. The sheet he handed me was laminated, but the corners were melted like someone had tried to set it on fire before thinking better of it. 10 rules, simple, short, and somehow more terrifying because of it. The first one? Only check-in guests between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., no exceptions. I wasn't told what would happen if someone showed up at 11:01, just that I'd better not let them in. Rule 2. Room 3 is always occupied. I wasn't to knock on the door, wasn't to clean it, and sure as hell wasn't to talk about it. I didn't even know where room 3 was yet, and already I hated it. Rule 3 made my stomach drop. If a guest came with no luggage, they were to be given room 5. Then I was to lock the door behind them, from the outside. There was a second key specifically for that. Rule 4. At 12:17 a.m., turn off all the front-facing lights for exactly 5 minutes. No explanation was given, not even a trust me, just do it. Lights off. Count. Rule 5. If I heard knocking from the supply closet, I was never, under any circumstances, to open it. No matter what I heard, whispers, cries, or begging, I wasn't allowed to open that door. Rule 6 was deceptively simple. Keep the lobby TV on channel 63. Didn't matter if it was playing static or full-blown demonic infomercials, channel 63 stayed on. Rule 7 gave me chills. If I saw a dog in the parking lot, I had to close my eyes. Didn't matter if it looked friendly, didn't matter if it barked or begged. Eyes shut, wait until it's gone. Rule 8. Some guests might try to bribe me for information. About what, I didn't know. But I was told not to answer, not even a single word. Rule 9 felt like some kind of ritual. At 3:33 a.m., I had to drink all the coffee in the black thermos under the desk. All of it. Didn't matter how it tasted, didn't matter if it was still warm. And finally, Rule 10. If a man named Frank showed up, I was to give him the master key and say, "Welcome back." I laughed, out loud. A dry, nervous thing. You serious with this? He didn't smile. You break one rule, Jake, and you're gone. That's if you're lucky. He pointed to the metal door behind the front desk. Your room's through there. Shift starts at 8. Don't be late. The room was basic. Cot, mini fridge, small TV, no windows. A single bulb buzzed overhead with a migraine's rhythm. I lay down, closed my eyes, and told myself it was a weird old man with a creepypasta sense of humor. I woke up at 7:55 p.m., my heart already thumping like it knew something I didn't. The front office felt different at night. The shadows seemed thicker, more confident. The lights buzzed a little louder, and the silence outside felt anticipatory. At 8 p.m. on the dot, the bell above the door jingled, but instead of dread, I felt a strange calm, almost like muscle memory kicking in. I straightened up, ready to act like this was any other job. The next few hours passed in a strange rhythm. I checked in 2 guests, an elderly couple with heavy luggage and a young man clearly passing through, both normal, both thankfully unaware of the rule sheet under the counter. I handed out keys, smiled, and even managed a bit of small talk. In between, I wandered the motel lobby, trying to memorize the layout. There was a vending machine tucked near the side hallway. An old rotary phone mounted to the wall, though I wasn't sure it worked. The carpet was frayed near room 3, and the door there looked untouched, like no one had opened it in years, yet it still carried the weight of presence. I glanced at the clock. Still early. The television buzzed with soft static, as per Rule 6. My eyes drifted to the parking lot. Nothing out of place. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe the rules were just old ghost stories to keep new hires from getting lazy. That comfort lasted right up until the bell jingled again, and he walked in. My breath hitched a little. I had expected silence, maybe even hoped for it. But when that bell rang, it felt like a judge's gavel. The man who walked in looked normal. Mid-40s maybe. Clean shirt, dusty boots, no luggage. But there was something in the way he moved, deliberate, unnatural, like he was trying to remember how people walk. "One night," he said, and his voice was flat, completely void of emotion, like he was reciting something he'd memorized but didn't understand. Not a hint of impatience or curiosity, just hollow. I hesitated, long enough for the silence to stretch thin. My mouth had gone dry, like my throat had forgotten how to swallow. Rule 3 echoed in my brain like a warning siren, but even then, part of me hoped I'd misunderstood. "Room 5, I managed, steadying my voice by sheer will. I handed him the key, and he took it with fingers that were just a touch too stiff. As we walked the dim hallway together, I caught myself stealing glances. He didn't speak, didn't blink. His eyes looked like glass, smooth and unfeeling. But behind that surface was a depth I couldn't quite explain. They didn't reflect the hallway or anything tangible, instead catching a light from somewhere else, somewhere wrong. Something that looked back at me, not through me. At me, focused, cold, intent. His face was pulled taut, as if it had been worn too long, the skin adapting to a shape it wasn't meant to hold. Under the weak glow of the wall sconce, I caught something twitching beneath the surface of his cheek, like a muscle trying to move the wrong way, like it wasn't used to being there. I opened room 5. He stepped inside like he'd done it 100 times. I shut the door and locked it from the outside. The click echoed louder than it should have. Back at the front desk, I collapsed into the chair, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I tried to focus on something, anything. The clock, the rule sheet, my own breathing. What the hell kind of motel had rules like these? What kind of place gave you a manual for surviving the night? This felt less like employment and more like a dare, disguised as a paycheck wrapped in dust and unease a paycheck. The room felt smaller than before, the air thicker. Every creak in the walls, every pop of the old pipes sent my nerves on high alert. I wasn't ready to deal with any of it. I was barely ready to sit still. I reread the rules again and again, each time finding something I had missed, like my brain was trying to decode some puzzle I didn't even know I was playing. My finger hovered over Rule 3. The words blurred slightly. I rubbed my eyes and blinked hard. Outside, the desert was unnervingly still. The air was still, untouched by even a breeze. Not a single insect chirped or fluttered. A complete dense silence pressed in from all sides, like the whole world was holding its breath. And I was the only idiot dumb enough to exhale. The room felt like it was watching me. The shadows leaned in closer. The television on channel 63 crackled softly, static humming like a low whisper. I didn't dare change the channel. That was Rule 6. It stayed on. My eyes wandered to the hallway, and for a brief second, I thought I saw a shadow move past room 3. Just a flicker, but enough to make me freeze. I didn't know what was in that room. I didn't want to. I tried to remind myself I needed this job, but that thought rang hollow. What I needed was to not be in that motel, with its scorched rules and its empty desert, and its guests who wore skin like it didn't belong to them. And the worst part? The night had only just begun. 12:17 a.m. I killed the front lights. Darkness swallowed everything. The desert outside was a pitch, no cars, no bugs, not even wind. Then came the footsteps. The sound of movement slithered around the office, slow and heavy, with a wet drag that defied explanation. It wasn't the gait of a person, nor the rhythm of any animal I'd ever heard. It scraped and slid in irregular patterns, each step thick with weight and hesitation, as though whatever was out there didn't quite know how to move in a body not meant for this world. They circled the office. I could hear their breath fogging up the glass. One paused right behind the front window. My fingers tightened around the desk. Something scraped the door. Fingernail? Claw? I wasn't going to find out. I closed my eyes and started counting seconds. I don't know why. Just instinct. If I kept count, maybe I could control it. 121, 122. When I reached 300, I flipped the lights back on. Nothing there, except for a single muddy footprint in the shape of a hoof. My breath caught. My first thought was that it had to be a prank, maybe an old boot with a carved sole. But as I stared closer, I realized the weight distribution was wrong. The edges of the print were sunk deep into the carpet, like whatever was left had mass, like it had been real. I crouched beside it, my heart hammering in my chest. The shape was unmistakable. Neither a shoe nor a paw, a hoof, but twisted, asymmetrical. Something that had never belonged to any animal in this world. My eyes scanned the room, slowly, every shadow now suspect. I could hear my pulse in my ears and feel my skin tighten over my bones. I tried to stand, but my knees resisted, like they knew something I didn't. I kept staring at the footprint as if it would change, as if it would offer an explanation. It didn't. What had been outside the door? What had tried to get in? And more importantly, had it left? I backed away slowly, never turning my back to that print. I needed to know more, needed to understand the rules, fully understand them. The rules were not warnings, they were survival instructions. And on the floor next to it, my rule sheet. Half burned, smoking, like someone had tried to light it with a match. I leaned over and picked it up. The laminate was warped now, the edges curled like they'd been dipped in acid. My hand shook, but I held onto it like it was a lifeline. I sat the rest of the night behind that desk, eyes on the door, ears twitching at every creak. At 3:33 a.m., I remembered Rule 9. I reached under the desk, pulled out the black thermos, and unscrewed the lid. The smell hit me first, burnt and sour like stale battery acid mixed with rust. I hesitated, staring into the dark liquid. What kind of rule was this? Drink old coffee in the middle of the night? Out here? In this place? It made no sense. Maybe none of the rules did. Still, I raised it to my lips. The first sip was revolting, sharp, and bitter with a metallic aftertaste that clung to the back of my throat. It didn't go down easy. Every swallow made my stomach lurch, but I kept drinking, because the rule said I had to. By the time I finished the last drop, my tongue felt numb and my chest had started to flutter. My heart picked up speed like someone had flipped a switch. A beat, then two, too fast, too hard. Was I panicking? Maybe. Or maybe it was the coffee, doing something it wasn't supposed to do. I pressed a palm to my chest and exhaled slowly, trying to settle my nerves. The pounding didn't stop. Great, I muttered to myself. As if fear wasn't enough, now I've got caffeine-induced heart failure. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just the coffee. It was the room, the motel, the eyes I felt watching me even when the halls were empty. When the sun finally bled across the desert, I didn't feel relief. I felt like I'd survived something I didn't understand, and the worst part was the silence from room 5, heavier than the darkness outside and far more deliberate. A silence that long, that patient doesn't feel like emptiness. It feels like waiting. I wasn't sure if I'd last another night, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever this place was, it was more than a motel. It was a trap dressed up in vacancy signs and desert dust. And I had just checked in. The second night didn't wait. It didn't ease in. It hit hard like a door slammed shut behind me and locked itself from the other side. I woke again at 7:55 p.m. Like the night before, no alarm or sound, only that same internal jolt, like my body knew it was time, as if something had synced itself to me. I pulled on my shirt, the one from yesterday, the one that still carried the smell of scorched laminate and cold sweat. My fingers hesitated at the doorknob. I told myself to breathe, to be calm, to act normal. But there's no acting normal when you're stepping back into something that doesn't want you to leave. The front office looked the same, but I didn't. I could feel how much one night had changed me. The light felt off, too bright in some places and too dim in others. My skin itched like the air was made of static. At 8:03 p.m. the bell jingled. A guest arrived, an older woman in a brown jacket with a dented suitcase. Her smile was tired, her voice soft, and she didn't seem bothered by anything. I checked her in and gave her room 7. As she walked away, I couldn't help but stare. Why would anyone choose to stay here? This wasn't the kind of motel you stumbled upon. It felt like the place people ended up at because something else had already gone wrong. I thought about my situation. I was here because I was broke, desperate, and cornered. If I had any other option, I'd never set foot in this building. But here I was, stuck. Somehow she seemed completely at peace. I wasn't sure if I envied that calm or feared what it meant. Maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe she was the kind of person this place attracted, quiet, resigned, drifting toward whatever waited in the dark. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. The rule sheet was still there, curled slightly at the edges where the laminate had burned. I glanced at it again. I didn't need to, but I couldn't stop myself. It was like some small gnawing thought had latched onto the back of my brain and refused to let go. My eyes drifted to that half-melted corner where something used to be, something that had been deliberately erased. I leaned in and flipped the page over. My breath hitched. There, almost hidden beneath the plastic, was a scrawl. A messy black ink sentence warped by heat but still fighting to be read. Rule 11. If someone gives you something from their room, don't keep it. Return it or burn it. And beneath that, smaller and shakier, they bond through memories. They can only reclaim what they gave. I stared at those words until they blurred. My stomach turned with a kind of hollow unease, like I was reading someone's dying confession. Who had written this? And why had they gone so far as to melt the laminate to cover it up? It didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a final cry, a desperate mark left behind by someone who had seen too much and didn't survive it. I could almost picture them scribbling that line in a panic, knowing no one would believe them, hoping someone might. That kind of fear doesn't fade away. It sticks. It grows like mold in the corners of your mind. I caught myself gripping the edge of the desk, knuckles white. Was this how it started? The paranoia creeping in? I had mocked the idea yesterday, brushing off the noises I'd heard when the lights went out. The shuffling, the soft scratching, things I tried to tell myself were just pipes, wind, the natural creaks of a dying building. But deep down, I had heard something. I had ignored it, dismissed it as imagination. And now I was beginning to realize that denial was just the first symptom. Thinking the rules were superstition. But now, something was shifting inside me. I could feel it. The questions. The weight of every glance, every whisper of wind against the window. Maybe this place didn't just hide monsters outside, it planted them inside you. A chill rolled down my spine and my hand trembled slightly as I slid the sheet back under the desk. My heartbeat wasn't driven by fear, it was rehearsing, as if my body was preparing itself for something inevitable, something coming whether I was ready or not. And I wasn't ready, not even close. At 10:15 p.m., I stepped out to smoke. I didn't smoke before this job. Now it felt like the only thing that grounded me. The desert night was still and cold. Sagebrush rustled like dry bones under the sand. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the lot, where the sodium lamp buzzed faintly, stood a dog, mid-sized, short-haired, almost statue still. Its head tilted in that eerie, deliberate way animals sometimes do when they're mimicking curiosity. It wasn't curiosity. It was a routine, something rehearsed and deliberate, like it was waiting for me to react, like it was waiting for a cue. I froze mid-flick with the lighter. Rule 7 echoed in my head with the weight of a warning carved into stone. I turned sharply toward the wall, shut my eyes tight, and tried to push away the pressure blooming in my chest. The dog barked, a short, clipped sound. Then it whimpered, almost pathetically. Then came the growl, low, guttered, dragging against my nerves like a serrated blade. I clenched my eyes harder, my body locking up with the primal need to turn and check. I knew better. I'd read the rule. Still, instinct clawed at me. The silence stretched. My breath caught. Then a voice, almost too close to my ear, broke through. "Jake, please. It's cold. I'm scared. It's me. Open your eyes." It wasn't the words that chilled me. It was the voice. It was mine. A perfect copy, hollowed out and trembling. I bit down on my knuckles hard enough to taste blood. The voice started crying, mimicking my cry, then laughing, then screaming. It flipped through tones like a skipping record of my worst nightmares. It wasn't trying to sound real. It was trying to sound familiar. Then everything stopped. There was no fade, no warning. A hard, unnerving silence that seemed to still the air itself. Even the wind, which had been whispering through the desert moments before, held its breath. My whole body tensed. The sound vacuum was so complete it made my ears ring. I cracked one eye open, barely daring to let in a sliver of vision. The dog was gone. In its place stood a man. He didn't move, just stood there in the exact same spot beneath the flickering light, now dead. His silhouette was sharp against the night, arms stiff, posture too symmetrical, too still to be natural. His face was cloaked in shadow, but I didn't need to see it. I could feel his eyes, like nails driven into the glass between us. They pinned me there. He didn't knock. He didn't call out, just stared. And the longer he stood, the more I realized something wasn't right about the shape of him, like a mannequin posed by someone who didn't understand how human bodies bend. Seconds became minutes. Minutes dragged into hours. I sat frozen, sweat cold on my back, heartbeat a metronome of dread. The clock behind the desk read 12:17 a.m. My breath caught. That was the time, the one from the rule sheet, the one where the lights had to be turned off. But the man was still there, still staring, still mine, and not mine. I hesitated, and then I didn't turn off the lights. I wanted to see him. I needed to know. But the moment passed, and everything shifted. His expression changed, something subtle but unmistakable. His mouth flattened into a hard line. The skin beneath his eyes grew tense, the whites now showing wide and unblinking. He wasn't just watching. He was angry. And then, it started. A pressure behind my eyes, dull at first, then tightening, twisting, like invisible hands pressing into my skull. My temples throbbed, my jaw clenched. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my fingers went numb. I panicked. My hand shot out and flipped the switch. The lights died. And from somewhere deep in the motel, behind walls or under floors, came a sound so unnatural it scraped the air raw, a high-pitched, gargling shriek. Like metal being torn and a scream forced through water, it came from everywhere and nowhere. Something had been disturbed, and it was angry. At 3:33 a.m., my alarm buzzed low and sharp. I already knew what it meant. The rule about the coffee, the one I thought was ridiculous the first night. Now it felt like a ritual that might hold something back, like a line drawn in the sand against the darkness. I got up, legs weak, and reached under the counter where the thermos always waited, fresh, full, steaming hot. I hadn't made it. I never had. But it was always there at 3:33, like clockwork. My fingers shook as I reached for it. I knocked it once against the counter, nearly spilling it all. The metal burned against my palms, but I clung to it like it was the only solid thing in the room. I brought it to my lips, hands trembling uncontrollably. The first sip scalded my tongue. The second poured down my chin. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I gulped it down in sloppy, desperate mouthfuls, coffee sloshing over my hands and dripping onto my shirt. My heart began hammering in my chest. It wasn't only the caffeine, it was terror itself, steeped into every gulp, crawling through my veins. This was the only protection I had, a bitter, burning metal of dread disguised as routine, and I drank every last drop. When the coffee was finally ready, I grabbed the thermos with both hands. It burned against my skin, but I didn't care. I brought it to my lips and drank, not in sips, in desperate, messy gulps. Hot liquid spilled down my chin, seared my tongue, and soaked my shirt. My eyes watered from the bitterness, and still I drank. It was awful. Sour, metallic, overbrewed. My heart pounded faster with every swallow, but I forced it down. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, if I stop now, something gets through. Something takes the gap. When I finished, the thermos clattered onto the desk, nearly toppling. I pressed my palms into my thighs to stop them from shaking. My heart was racing. It wasn't only the caffeine, it was fear itself, laced through every heartbeat. I was trying to drown in it. And what terrified me most? Even with the sun shining on my face, I could still feel the weight of his stare pressing against my skull like fingerprints scorched into memory. I didn't move the rest of the night. I sat at the desk, knees to my chest, a blanket around my shoulders. Every time I tried to close my eyes, I felt his stare through the wall. The corners of his mouth lifted, just a little, enough to let me know he knew I was still awake. At dawn, he vanished. He didn't walk away or drive off. He simply vanished. Simply gone. Like the light had erased him. It didn't erase the image that burned into my head. His eyes, they were mine. Now, they were inside my dreams. I didn't sleep when my shift ended. I lay on the motel bed in my room, staring at the ceiling. My reflection in the bathroom mirror felt unfamiliar, like it was studying me more than copying. When I blinked, I swore it didn't blink with me. My eyes stung, gritty and red. The whites were splotched with little red veins I didn't remember seeing before. It felt like something had been staring back at me all night and left a residue. I showered, but the water didn't make me feel clean. My skin felt filmy, like I'd brought something invisible back with me, something I couldn't scrub off. All day I tried to distract myself. I walked into town, drank coffee I couldn't taste, bought a pack of smokes from a gas station and made small talk with the cashier. But behind every pair of eyes I met, I kept searching, wondering if they were looking at me or through me. By the time the sun began to fall, my chest was tight. The light shifted again, unnatural, and stretched like the shadows were waiting for permission to move. At 7:55 p.m., my eyes opened before I realized I'd even lain down. A new night was beginning, and I knew it wouldn't let me forget what I saw. The third night began like a breath being held. I woke at 7:55 p.m. with dry eyes and the weight of something imagined pressing down on my chest. No dreams, no clarity, just a thick layer of silence stuck to the walls around me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands for a long time before getting dressed. I skipped the mirror. I didn't need to see what was different. The air outside my room was warmer than usual, the kind of warmth that sticks to your clothes and follows you like a second skin. The lobby looked untouched, clean, but too clean like someone had spent hours scrubbing away evidence of something they couldn't explain. At 8:04 p.m. the bell rang. A man stood at the entrance alone, sharply dressed in a gray suit with dusty shoes. His eyes were strange in how still they were. He arrived without luggage. "Room for one," he said. "Reservation?" "Number. But I've been here before." Something was unsettling about how casually he said it. I found myself wondering what exactly he meant by that. Had he stayed here before? If so, why would he ever come back? I was here because I had no choice, but no one returned to this place willingly. Not unless they were searching for something they shouldn't find. He glanced over my shoulder at the lobby TV, which hissed static on channel 63. I followed his gaze instinctively. "Do you ever see anything on that screen?" he asked. I didn't respond right away. That question weighted it, like he knew something I didn't. "No," I finally said. He tilted his head slightly, then smiled. "Not yet, then." That answer stuck with me. What exactly did he expect me to see? I wondered if the static on that channel was hiding something only visible to those who had already lost too much sleep. The idea that I might eventually see something there, something waiting, unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. I reached under the desk and slid him the key to room 5. As he took it, I walked around the desk and accompanied him down the hallway. He didn't say a word and didn't look at me, only moved with that same unnerving calm. When we reached room 5, I unlocked the door. He stepped inside, not glancing around, not even blinking. He just walked to the center of the room and stood there, motionless. I watched him for a moment longer, then slowly closed the door and turned the lock behind him. That was the rule. No luggage meant room 5. And once they were in, the door stayed shut. The TV popped. Just once. A loud snap that startled me more than it should have. I turned back toward it and stared, narrowing my eyes, trying to see something, anything that might explain what the man meant. Static hissed steadily, unchanged. I leaned in, watching, the flickers for patterns, shadows, and a face hidden beneath the noise. Nothing. Just a field of snow and my distorted reflection warping like heat rising from asphalt. I waited, tense, eyes straining for any flicker of meaning. When nothing came, I leaned back slowly and thought, maybe he's right. Not yet, at least. At 9:30 p.m., I looked up and saw a man standing near the counter. He was already inside, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed directly on me. I didn't recognize him. His face was ordinary, maybe too ordinary. Brown jacket, jeans, and a tired look in his eyes. He stepped forward and set a key on the counter. Room 4. "I think you checked me in earlier," he said. I stared at the key. My name wasn't on the log. I didn't remember him walking in, didn't remember handing him that key. But the number was written in my handwriting. "Must have been busy," I muttered. He leaned on the counter and looked around slowly like he was trying to decide if we were alone. "You ever get the feeling this place has a memory?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, pretending like it wasn't a serious question. "I don't know. Just weird vibe. Like the walls have seen more than they should." I didn't answer. His gaze returned to me, more direct now. "How long have you been working here?" "Not long." "You probably hear a lot of strange things, huh? People talk, leave stuff behind, ask odd questions." Again, I stayed silent. I felt Rule 8 start to tighten in my chest. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a money clip, thick with bills. "Look, I'm not trying to cause trouble. Just curious. Places like this don't exist for no reason. So what's the deal? What's really going on here?" I forced myself to stay still. Part of me wanted to speak, to ask him what he knew, to beg for some kind of explanation. Maybe he could help. Maybe he already understood more than I did. But the weight of Rule 8 pressed down harder than my doubt. "I don't know anything." He held my eyes for a long time, then slowly set the money clip on the counter. "This says you might." My chest tightened. I hadn't seen that much money in one place in months. Rent, food, the last mechanic bill. This could make those problems vanish, at least for a while. But what if this was a test? What if someone was watching, someone who wanted to know if I'd break the rules? If I took it, I might lose the only job keeping me afloat. And then what? I'd be broke and hunted. I'm sure I don't. He let out a long breath through his nose and gave a small smile. "Didn't think you'd talk, but I had to try." He slid a business card across the counter instead. "If you ever change your mind or something doesn't sit right, call me." I looked down. His name and number were printed neatly. No company, no logo, just information and implication. Then he turned and left, footsteps measured, shoulders a little too square, as if he was trying not to look back. The door creaked open again. A young man stepped inside. He was unusually clean and uncomfortably polite. His clothes were pressed, hands folded in front of him like a student waiting for permission to speak. Something about his smile felt practiced, his demeanor unsettling in its precision. "Checking in?" I asked. He nodded but didn't say his name. When I asked for it, his reply was mumbled, almost as if he was testing how little he could say and still be understood. "Payment?" He blinked once, tilted his head, and gave a half shrug. "Already handled." Each of his sentences ended like he was listening for a cue, waiting to be told his next line. Short, clipped responses, no effort to clarify. He stepped forward, reached into his pocket, and extended something to me, a medallion. Black, smooth, strangely warm. I began, but he pressed it into my palm, fingers curling around mine, holding it shut for a moment longer than necessary. He didn't speak again, just smiled, turned, and walked away. I stood there, medallion in hand, skin tingling. I stared after him as he vanished down the hall. Then the headache started, a tight band across my forehead that pulsed with every flicker of the lobby light. Déjà vu hit me next. Images and sensations that didn't belong to any memory I could place. Shadows on ceilings, wet footsteps in reverse, voices humming inside old radios. I shook my head, gritted my teeth, and dropped the medallion onto the counter. Except, it didn't drop. My hand opened, but the object clung to my skin. It didn't feel stuck. It felt like it was part of me, as if my skin had grown around it while I wasn't looking. Panicking, I returned to the back office and tore open the binder. I needed the rules. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe this had happened before. Rule 11. It flickered through my thoughts. No accepting gifts. But what was I supposed to do? He forced it into my hand. I hadn't asked for it, hadn't agreed to take it. He pressed it on me like it had a purpose of its own. Still, the rules didn't care about intentions, just results. There was nothing else listed. No guidelines for objects like this, no instructions for cursed jewelry, only silence where answers should have been. I grabbed my lighter. Just as the flame flared up, I glanced toward the lobby window and froze. The young man stood outside, barely visible behind the glass, hands pressed against the pane. His eyes were wide now, pleading, desperate. His mouth moved, forming silent words I couldn't hear. Behind him, shadows rippled along the motel's walls. They weren't reflections or tricks of the light. Shapes moving against the surface like they were crawling underneath the paint. They were getting closer. I didn't hesitate. I gritted my teeth and clawed at the medallion, trying to tear it from my palm. It felt fused to my skin, a part of me that wasn't supposed to be there. With a forceful jerk, it finally peeled away, leaving my fingers trembling and damp with sweat. The fear built in my hands and crawled up my spine, telling me that if I didn't get rid of it now, those shadows would come for me next. I threw the medallion into the trash can, snatched the lighter, and sparked the flame. The second the fire touched it, a searing hiss shot through the room like the air itself was exhaling in relief. The pressure lifted. Like a held breath finally released, the air expanded, and everything felt momentarily weightless. I looked up. The young man was still there, but only for a moment. His outline wavered, colors bleeding into the air around him. Bit by bit, his features softened and dissolved. His eyes were the last to go, wide and finally at peace, before even they evaporated like mist. By the time I blinked, there was nothing left. Just space where he'd stood like the air had swallowed him whole, like he had never existed at all. And somehow, that felt like the point. But the night wasn't done with me yet. Hours passed in a haze. I sat there, numb, waiting for the next rule to drag me back into motion. My thoughts spiraled. Was I losing it? Was this motel peeling away pieces of me, night after night? By the time the clock crept toward midnight, I was already staring at it. 12:17 was etched into my brain now, the hour of darkness, the hour of hiding. I didn't even question it anymore, just waited for it like a prisoner counts down to lights out. Then the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in, breathing hard, suitcase in hand. Normal. Too normal. "Checking in," he said. His voice was cheerful, casual. I blinked. "It's past 11. No check-ins allowed." He frowned. "I've been driving all night. Come on, just one night. I'll pay extra." "I can't. It's against the rules." His face shifted, frustration bleeding into his tone. "Are you serious right now?" I said I'll pay. What kind of business turns away customers? The clock ticked louder. 12:15. My hand started to shake. "Sir, please, you need to go." "Number, you need to do your job. Get me a room." He slammed his hand on the counter. I flinched. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. The second hand jumped to 12:17. As the clock hit 12:17, I threw myself under the desk and shut off the lobby lights. Darkness swallowed everything in an instant. My breath caught in my throat. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening. "What the hell are you doing?" The man's voice sliced through the blackness, sharp and angry from across the counter. I didn't respond. I curled into myself, knees drawn tight, hands pressed over my ears as if they could block out what I knew was coming. His voice turned. First frustration, then fear. Desperation seeped into his words, then gave way to something raw, animalistic. A scream tore through the lobby, not human in its pitch or cadence. It was the sound of something being stripped from the world it knew. A dragging noise followed, heavy, wet, grotesque. Something enormous slid across the linoleum with a sick, squelching pull. The sound snaked into my bones and settled there. And then, stillness. It wasn't peace. It was a void. I waited. I don't know how long. Seconds lost their meaning. When I finally moved, my body resisted like it had forgotten how. I crawled from behind the desk, breathing shallowly, and turned on the lights. The lobby looked untouched, eerily undisturbed. It was as if the man had never walked in, never argued, never screamed. The air buzzed faintly from the vending machine in the corner, the only sound in a space that had just moments ago been filled with chaos. I stood there, stunned, my mind scrambling to connect what I remembered with what I saw or didn't see. The man was gone, vanished completely, as if the motel itself had consumed him. There wasn't even a trace left behind. I blinked rapidly, hoping the act would return him to view, but the emptiness hit harder than his presence ever did. It wasn't just that he'd disappeared. It was the way the space no longer acknowledged he'd ever been there, like the darkness had claimed more than just his body. It had erased his existence. I stumbled outside. The night air hit me like a slap. My hands trembled as I lit a cigarette. I leaned against the motel's outer wall, eyes darting into the shadows, brain trying to make order from chaos. What had I seen? What had I let happen? A man had been standing here, talking, arguing. Now he was gone. I tried to force reason into the situation, but logic cracked under the weight of what I'd just lived through. I tried to make sense of it, but reason only sank deeper into confusion. The image of the man who had offered me money earlier returned, vivid and unsettling. My thoughts clung to him like static to skin. Then I saw him. He was walking along the far edge of the parking lot, the same jacket brushing against his legs with each step, the same familiar stride that somehow felt rehearsed. But when my eyes reached his face, my breath caught. His expression was fixed in a grin, unnaturally wide and deliberate, stretched far past comfort. I shouted, "Hey!" He kept walking. I called again, louder this time. He stopped. His movements were slow and mechanical. He turned, locking eyes with me from across the lot. The grin on his face widened, unnatural and cold. Then, without a word, he turned and resumed his path, disappearing step by step into the shadows. I couldn't move. That smile lingered in my mind like a burn on film. something no human should wear. A part of me recoiled from the recognition, and another whispered that this was retribution, a consequence for nearly violating Rule 8, for even daring to question the fabric of this place. I watched until he vanished, unsure if I was more afraid of what I saw or what I might become. I didn't want to drink the coffee. The thought alone made my stomach churn. My hands were still trembling from what had just happened, but I walked back inside and found the thermos waiting in its usual spot beneath the counter. I picked it up and felt the warmth against my palm. I unscrewed the cap and lifted it to my nose. The scent made my stomach flip. I stood there a long time just holding it, remembering the taste, the nausea, the nights I thought I wouldn't make it through. Then, with a deep breath, I walked to the restroom and poured it out, watched it swirl down the drain like it had never existed. I wasn't ready to drink it. I wasn't ready to follow the rules. Not tonight. Not after everything I'd seen. I stared at the sink, the last drops of coffee swirling into nothingness, and whispered to myself, I'm not even sure the rules matter anymore. The shift began, but I didn't. Not really. Not the way I used to. I walked into the lobby like someone stepping back onto the battlefield, already knowing the ground was mined. Every step felt heavy, like it came with a question I hadn't asked. I didn't even bother clocking in. I was already here, wasn't I? Something inside me had cracked open the night before. Whatever comfort the rules had given me was gone, and with it, the illusion of control. The motel had shown me things, faces that vanished, rules that punished, darkness that wasn't empty. I had questions now, so many questions, and answers? They were hiding behind locked doors. Room 3. I didn't even know where it was until that moment. It sat at the end of the north hallway, tucked behind a bend I'd never bothered exploring. The number was faded on the door like someone had tried to scrub it off but gave up halfway through. Rule 2 rang in my head. Room 3 was always occupied. I wasn't supposed to knock, clean it, or even talk about it. I'd followed that rule without question. Tonight, obedience felt overrated. I stood before the door with my key ring in hand, my heart thudding against my ribs like it wanted to bolt. The key slipped in easier than I expected. The lock clicked with a sigh, and I pushed the door open. The stench hit first, thick, sour rot that coiled around my throat. My stomach rolled. The air inside was warm and wet, like breath from a dying thing. There was no furniture, only concrete floors and cracked walls, and in the middle of the room, a hole. Not a crack or damage or a forgotten maintenance project. A hole. Perfectly round, large enough to crawl through, lined with stone that didn't match the motel's construction. It went down to nothing. The scent came from that void. The rot, the heat, the pressure. My skin crawled just looking at it. Something inside me, old and primal, screamed to shut the door and never return. This was a gate, a threshold, a portal to something that had never been meant to enter this world, or perhaps something trying to leave it. I closed the door and leaned against it, sweating and shaking, eyes wide. My mind began to spiral, connecting pieces I hadn't dared to before. Could this be where the night visitors came from? That stench, that unnatural void in the floor. This room was wrong. I remembered seeing shadows linger near this hallway, vague shapes I'd dismissed as tricks of the light. But now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe this was a gate they used, a place they crossed through, night after night, wearing other people's faces. Then I remembered room 5, the medallion, the shadows. That door had secrets too, and I hadn't had a chance to understand them. I turned and headed down the hall. I was halfway to the room when the front bell rang. A man stood at the entrance, alone, no luggage. Room 5 echoed in my mind. He had the same stiff posture, the same unreadable expression. I watched him more closely this time. He blinked too slowly and turned his head with a pause like he was waiting for something. His movements were too calculated and deliberate, like someone mimicking human behavior without understanding it. Room for 1, he said. I walked back behind the desk, slid the room 5 key toward him and stood up. He took it without a word. I followed him down the corridor, eyes studying each subtle, unnatural twitch in his stride. The peeling wallpaper, the odd stains near the doorframe, and the slight hum in the air now seemed to frame something I shouldn't be walking toward. The door creaked open, and I peered inside. It was clean. Too clean. Sterile. Nothing personal. But there were marks on the floor where furniture had been dragged, dents in the wall like fists had once slammed into them. A chair lay on its side in the corner. He stepped in and stood silently in the center. I locked the door and returned to the lobby. My eyes drifted to the TV, a soft buzz humming from channel 63 as static danced across the screen. For a moment, it looked like nothing had changed. But then, flickers of movement began to form behind the noise. Shapes started to emerge, figures slipping in and out of the haze. I leaned in closer, eyes straining. The static shifted into something uncanny. There I was, standing in the lobby, staring directly into the screen. It was me, watching myself. My breath hitched, sweat forming at my temple. The screen pulsed again, cutting to a feed of the north hallway, then room 3, then the supply closet, and finally, my room. Each shot grainy and warped, yet unmistakable. The motel wasn't just showing images, it was showing me. I sat, frozen, the realization sinking in like a stone in my chest. The motel was watching me back. But why now? Then I remembered. The coffee. Last night I hadn't touched it, and tonight I hadn't either. Not yet, at least. The time for that hadn't come. Maybe that was it. Maybe the coffee had been a veil all along, something to keep the truth clouded. As unsettling as the footage was, it was also clarity, a glimpse through the static of my own understanding. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I knew I needed more of it. I needed more answers. Time dragged. I kept glancing at the clock. 11:55. I hadn't heard anything strange. I waited for the clock to crawl toward midnight, numb and aimless, haunted by the lingering echoes of the medallion. A silent dread had nested in my bones. Then, the knock shattered the stillness. Not from the front door. It came from the supply closet, every muscle locked as if someone had poured concrete through my veins. The sound wasn't loud, a firm, deliberate rap that cut through the air like a warning. I stood, legs wobbling beneath me, and approached the door slowly. Then came another knock, followed by a voice, muffled, desperate, edged with agony. "Help! Please! Someone help me!" My hand moved to the doorknob against my better judgment. I wasn't thinking about Rule 2, I was thinking about the voice. It was human, someone familiar, and utterly terrified. The voice broke again, more urgent, raw with pain. I opened the door. The light fell onto a nightmare. A man lay sprawled across the floor, stripped of skin, his raw tissue glistening and twitching like something newly born yet already dying. Blood pooled thick beneath him, spreading across the floor like a warning sign. He turned his head. Eyes met mine. "Jake, don't leave me here." Recognition snapped through me, his voice. That face, what was left of it. The guest from the previous night. The one who refused to leave. The one I'd turned away before the lights went out. I staggered back, hand trembling, heart pounding like a war drum in my ears. He writhed forward, leaving behind a crimson trail as he reached for me. "Please," he rasped, voice barely holding together. The shrill beep of my watch pierced the silence. It was 12:17, the time to shut off the lights. But I couldn't move. Not yet. Not with that man still crawling, bleeding, whispering my name behind the door. I hesitated. If I stayed, if I tried to help him, maybe I'd become like him. Skinless, writhing, crying for salvation that never came. Fear surged through me like fire, and I knew I didn't have the strength to fight both the rules and whatever waited in that darkness. With trembling hands and a hollow heart, I closed the closet door, each inch of it sealing away the sound of his plea. I turned and ran, every step a betrayal, every breath heavy with guilt. I reached the lobby and killed the lights, and I waited. Darkness swallowed the space, thick as fog. I crouched behind the desk, panting, trembling, eyes shut tight. Then the sounds began. Heavy dragging, squelching, the wet slap of flesh against tile. Something moved past the desk, breathing loud and uneven. My heart hammered like a siren in my ears. The noises faded. I stayed still for a long time, breath held, heart uncertain. The silence felt too perfect, like the world holding its breath with me. Eventually, I rose and turned on the lights, my legs heavy and thoughts spiraling. I couldn't keep doing this, waiting, hiding, wondering if I was the next one. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was a taunt. I was unraveling, and I could feel it. Something in me refused to sit still. I stood, drawn forward by the memory of his voice, desperate and begging me not to leave him. I walked toward the supply closet, each step heavy with dread. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, matching the rhythm of my footsteps. I paused before the door, staring at the metal handle, remembering the way his eyes had locked with mine, pleading from inside that small space. I needed to know if he was still there, if I'd left him to die, or if something else had already claimed him. I gripped the knob with a hand slick with sweat and slowly turned it. The hinges creaked as the door opened. Silence. The closet was empty. Nobody. The floor was streaked with blood, a thin trail weaving aimlessly across the tile, disappearing beneath the shelves. The metallic scent clung stubbornly to the air, thick enough to taste. Claw marks etched into the floor whispered of a desperate struggle. Just a barren floor, and a wall smeared faintly with something dark. It could have been old paint, or maybe just a shadow playing tricks. But I knew better. The metallic tang of blood still clung faintly in the air, and streaks along the ground, thin and red, led nowhere, just stopped, as if whatever had been dragged out simply vanished. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I'd let happen. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if fear or guilt would be the thing to kill me. I slumped into the chair behind the desk, thoughts spinning like blades. My mind went to the man who had given me his card, the one who had offered money in exchange for answers. I had seen him wandering outside, aimless and smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. I remembered that hollow look. But maybe I didn't have any other choice. I took the card out of my pocket. His number stared back at me, taunting in its simplicity. My hands shook as I dialed. The phone rang. Once, twice, 5 times. Finally, it picked up. Hello? His voice was calm, polite, almost bored, like he didn't remember me at all. It's Jake, I said, voice hoarse. You ask questions. About this place, I need to talk. A pause. Then, I'm sorry. Who is this? The motel, I pressed. You came here, gave me a card, asked questions. I turned you away. I think you've got the wrong number. My pulse spiked. Listen, there's a hole in room 3. A man with no skin in the supply closet. This place isn't real, or it's too real. I need help. There was silence. Then the voice on the other end changed. You broke a rule. Don't push your luck. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The dial tone buzzed endlessly in my ear, each note another nail in the coffin of my sanity. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked, every breath shallow and tight. My thoughts raced, tripping over each other in panic. That voice, distorted and guttural, scraped against something deep inside me. It wasn't human, not even close. And if that thing could reach through a phone line, maybe nothing was safe anymore. I reached for the thermos under the counter, the one that always appeared at 3:33. My hands trembled as I unscrewed the lid and lifted it to my nose. It smelled like coffee, but I knew it wasn't. I poured it into a glass. The liquid oozed out, thick and tar-like. It wasn't brown, it was black, and it shimmered faintly under the light. Like oil, like something dead. What had I been drinking every night? Something was off. Every sip had dulled my thoughts, fogged my memory. They were feeding me a lie, using it to chain me to this place. Whatever was in that thermos served not to help me stay awake, but to keep me asleep. Keep me blind. Keep me here? I stood there for a long moment, staring at the glass. Then I carried it into the bathroom and poured it down the drain. The thick sludge clung to the porcelain before slowly disappearing. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I need to get out of here, I whispered. And I meant it. I no longer started my shift. I confronted it. Each night blurred into the next, a carousel of madness spinning faster with every rule I questioned. I'd stopped being afraid of breaking them. Now I feared what obedience made me. There was no order in this place, only chains dressed up as laws, and I'd worn them long enough. I began the night with preparation, a flashlight in my hand, a pocket knife tucked into my waistband. I made my way back to room 3. This time, I didn't hesitate. The air was thicker, the rot stronger. When I opened the door, the stench rushed out like a living thing. The hole had changed. It pulsed, alive, humming with a low vibration that rattled the walls. A wave of rot and heat surged from its depths. I aimed my flashlight inside and froze. Faces floated in the black, humanoid, and incomplete. Some twisted in silent screams, others had no eyes, just empty sockets staring through me. Mouths gaped too wide, as if unhinged. One whispered my name with a voice that didn't echo but bled into my bones. Behind the faces were cocoons, translucent and slimy sacs strung like lanterns across a fleshy web. Within each, a human form writhed. Some wore half-grown skin, others still twitched, rebirthing into something new. I realized with a sick drop in my gut that these were skinwalkers, incubating, waiting for their moment to emerge, to slip on stolen flesh. The stench turned metallic. I gagged, my knees buckled. I stumbled back, chest heaving, slammed the door with trembling hands, and leaned against it, bile rising in my throat. As I turned to the supply closet next, a new wave of dread clawed at my chest. I hesitated mid-step, my eyes fixed on the door. The last time I opened it, I found a broken man, skinless and suffering, begging for help. He hadn't been there when I returned. The memory tightened around my ribs like a vice. Still, something inside me whispered that I couldn't keep avoiding it. If I wanted things to change, if I wanted to break this cycle, I had to face it, even if it terrified me. I approached slowly. The air shifted again, cooler now, as though the room itself held its breath. I gripped the knob with trembling fingers and yanked it open. For a moment, nothing. Silence. Then the walls groaned. Something massive pressed outward, heavy and impatient. A hand pushed through the shadows, raw muscle and sinew, bone glinting in the fluorescent light. Clawed, reaching. I slammed it shut before it could pull itself free, heart pounding in my chest. What I had just seen was a full view, not a fleeting shadow. It was a revelation, undeniable and clear. This place wasn't just haunted by shadows, it was a breeding ground for them. Whatever lived here, whatever fed off these rules, was growing stronger, and I was already too deep, already too late. Whatever came next would demand more than just survival. It would demand a reckoning. A sharp buzz made me spin around. The TV in the corner flickered to life, tuned to channel 63. Instead of static or unsettling visuals, it displayed a face of mine. Not a reflection, but something more unsettling. It studied me with unnatural calm, as if it already knew what I would do next. "You've gone too far. Stay. Let it all go. That would hurt less." The cadence was mine, but the weight behind it wasn't. My stomach turned. I reached for the remote and shut it off. The screen went black, yet the image lingered, burned into the void like a ghost behind closed eyes. I stood frozen, staring at nothing, feeling everything. That face. It wasn't warning me. It was inviting me. I heard footsteps echo behind me and turned slowly. There he was again. The man who had offered me money, the same man I'd seen aimlessly wandering the grounds, stood in the hallway. He wore the same clothes and had the same trimmed beard, but something was missing. His smile was stretched too tight, his eyes void of recognition. It was like he'd been reset. I took a step closer. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at me and said, in the calmest, flattest voice I'd heard all night, "I don't know you. Are you a guest here?" My stomach sank. I had spoken to him. He'd offered me a bribe. He'd wanted answers. I opened my mouth, but no words came. He turned, about to leave, then paused and faced me again. His voice dropped, something deeper pushing through. "You can't change anything unless we let you. Stop trying. Walk away. That's the only peace you'll get." Then he walked off as if none of it had ever happened. And I stood there, realizing the message was about more than fear. It represented futility. And maybe I'd just heard it too late. A man appeared at 11:30. I didn't hear a knock. I didn't hear anything at all. There was only presence, sudden and undeniable. Tall, with a sharp jawline, dressed immaculately. There was a practiced stillness about him, like someone who had waited in the same spot 1,000 times before. "Frank," he said calmly, as though I were supposed to remember him. The name sparked recognition, not from anything I remembered, but because I had been told to know it. I was supposed to give him the master key and say, "Welcome back." But my throat caught. I hesitated. He looked at me, his gaze unreadable. His expression revealed nothing, neither welcome nor warning, only a quiet expectation that weighed heavily in the air. I didn't want to say it, but my lips moved. "Welcome back." He took the key with a nod. "You're close," he said. "Closer than most." He turned away. I followed him. "Is this your job? Keeping people trapped?" He stopped. For the first time, something flickered across his face, perhaps regret, or maybe warning. "I used to be where you are," he said. "You think this place punishes rule breaking? It punishes the wrong kind of questions more. Then why are you still here? I didn't choose fast enough. But you can. Burn it all, or become me." He walked away, his footsteps quiet against the linoleum, retreating into a hallway that hadn't been there just minutes ago. I stood motionless, a heavy realization settling in my chest. Frank didn't need to convince me with words. His presence alone spoke volumes. The hallway swallowed him, and with him, the sense of inevitability grew stronger. Somehow, I knew what had to be done, and I knew he had once stood exactly where I was now, burdened with the same terrible clarity. I ran to the gas station, the same one where I'd met that kind of old man days ago. He wasn't there, but the pumps still worked. I filled a can and drove back before 12 o'clock. I stood in the hallway, a can of gasoline in my hand, pulse pounding like a war drum. I thought about where to start. The pit. Room 3. That's where they bred. That's where they waited. If I burned this place down, there was a chance innocent people might still be inside. But if I didn't, those people would eventually be hunted by the things that crawled through that pit. Skinwalkers didn't negotiate. They consumed. And if I was going to stop this, I had to do it before 12:17, before the light died and they roamed freely. I doused room 3 first. Gasoline soaked the carpet, the walls, and the doorframe. The fumes clung to the air, sharp and suffocating, yet still not enough to mask the foul, wet stench spilling from the black pit in the center of the room. I stood at the threshold, watching the darkness pulse and quiver like a breathing wound. Half-formed bodies dangled from the fleshy walls, suspended in twitching, glistening sacks. Some had human eyes, some had animal limbs, none of them whole. The pit itself seemed to groan in protest, as if aware of what I intended. Faces swirled within, familiar and hollow, stretching toward me in silent agony. I thought of the victims, the ones devoured, the ones replaced. Skinwalkers slumbered here, curled tight in their cocoons, waiting to rise. Every instinct screamed to run, but I stepped forward instead and emptied the gas can. The walls didn't hiss, they wept, like the place was mourning itself. Then I moved to room 5. It was the room I'd assigned with shaking hands, the one where something had moved that didn't move like anything human. I stepped inside with my heart thudding like a warning bell. The air was heavier, charged. Shadows in the corners seemed to twitch, watching. I scanned the space with my flashlight, the furniture undisturbed, the bed perfectly made, but the energy was wrong. Wrong in the kind of way that made your instincts claw at your spine. I poured the gasoline with steady, deliberate hands, letting it trail along the carpet, beneath the bed, over the dresser. This wasn't just about burning a place, it was about severing something's hold. The supply closet came next. My hands trembled as I approached, memories of the claw and sinew searing through my mind. I couldn't predict what might emerge if I opened it all the way. The fear of what might be hiding behind that door crawled up my spine. I cracked the door just enough to create an opening and poured the gasoline through the gap, heart hammering against my ribs. The fuel spread across the tiles inside, the fumes wrapping around me like a warning. The lobby was last, the center, the heart. The TV sparked to life as I splashed gasoline across the floor. Channel 63 switched on again without a remote. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Finally, the thermos. I unscrewed the lid, peered inside. The black liquid inside recoiled like it sensed what was coming. I poured gasoline on it too. Whatever this was, whatever they were feeding me, it wouldn't survive tonight. Channel 63 flickered back on, unprompted. The screen displayed my face, aged, weary, wearing the same coat Frank had on earlier. The eyes weren't mine anymore. They carried something colder, more resolute. "You won't destroy this," the screen said. "You'll inherit it. Let go of the fire. Accept your place." My grip on the matchbox tightened. My breath hitched. The voice on the screen grew softer, almost pleading. "You could make it easier. The pain, the questions, all of it could end." I looked at the thermos one last time. The liquid inside shimmered unnaturally. I'd tasted their control. Enough was enough. "I'm not staying," I muttered. Then I struck the match. Flames caught fast. The motel screamed, with something deeper than wood or metal, something ancient. I threw the match into the pit in room 3 and watched it take. The air cracked. The walls pulsed. At 12:17, I killed the lobby lights and bolted through the front door. Fire chased at my heels, licking the air with greedy tongues. Shadows writhed in the flames, monstrous silhouettes twisting and screaming as they burned, the skinwalkers caught by the darkness they once ruled. I reached the parking lot coughing, my chest seizing with smoke. The air was heavy, suffocating. I turned back toward the inferno, heat washing over me like a tidal wave. Flames surged through the motel's windows, climbing the walls, devouring the place room by room. The scream of dying things was drowned by the roar of fire. I didn't know if I'd made it out, but I knew it was finally ending. The fire kept rising. The faces in the void twisted, the TV shattered, the pit collapsed. And when I turned, I saw Frank standing at the edge, still alive, still whole. Relief burst in my chest, wild and thoughtless. I hadn't expected to see him again. For a fleeting second, I smiled. We had survived. At least, I thought we had. "You made a choice," he said. "I did." He nodded, then turned and vanished. The motel burned, and as I stood there, covered in ash and sweat, I looked into the flames and whispered, "I got out, but you're still watching, aren't you?" Months pass. Now I stand behind the register of a remote gas station, the kind nobody remembers except when they need to. The sky outside stays a dull gray, and the buzz of the fluorescent lights above becomes part of the silence. I tell myself I'm safe, that the motel is gone, that the fire ended it all. The days bleed together. The monotony is its comfort. I stack shelves, I mop the floor, I serve coffee to strangers and smile like I believe this life is real. Until the bell rings. I glance up. The man at the counter stares with vacant eyes and a grin that stretches just a little too wide. My breath catches in my throat. He's not just any customer. He's one of them. The pit may have burned, the rooms reduced to ash, the screams silenced, but something escaped. He tilts his head, the smile never fading. No words, just that look. Recognition without humanity. The air is heavy again, thick with unseen pressure. My hands tremble as I take a step back. I thought I got out, but they never left, and now they know where I am.